All right. Well, welcome everyone to the second traffic calming meeting for Amalie Drive. We're meeting here virtually on February 20th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. My name is David Greaves. I'm an engineer and I work with NDOT on a lot of traffic calming projects. And I was there to present at the first meeting. So if anyone was able to join that, we've met before. That was back in November. So tonight we're going to cover some of the same material, but a little bit quicker, and then spend a little more time looking at the construction plans that have been generated for Amalie Drive before talking about some of the next steps in the program and how it will proceed through the rest of the process. So to get kicked off, we're just going to go over kind of what traffic calming is in general. And this is the Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program. So that's what NSTC stands for. We focus on residential streets, so not large collectors or certainly arterials, more kind of local or smaller collector neighborhood streets where folks live. And this is a program that focuses mainly on physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. And what that means is we try not to do projects like these like one block at a time, but rather choose strings of segments that tend to treat an entire corridor with traffic calming all at once. One of the primary goals of the traffic calming program is speed reduction, and we'll talk about why that's both important for safety as well as some of the different strategies that we'll use to hopefully achieve that goal. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. Now, we have engineering bold and underlined here because that of the 3 is the one that NDOT, Nashville's Department of Transportation, has the greatest ability to affect with designs intended to slow vehicles and improve safety. So certainly we do education. This meeting is an example of one of the ways we do that. And there are numerous programs that NDOT operates to kind of encourage safe driving and safe traveling in general. Enforcement is within the scope of Metro Nashville's police department, among many, many other things. So while having police monitoring speeds and writing tickets is one way to encourage safer and slower driving, they cannot be everywhere at all times. So the hope is that if we design a physical solution to be installed, hopefully the need for enforcement of speeding will be reduced. Speeding and slow driving tie into safety and Vision Zero really closely. For anyone who doesn't know, Vision Zero is the idea that nobody should have to be killed or seriously injured on Nashville's public streets. So there are a lot of different types of projects and programs within NDOT that are all working towards this goal, and traffic calming is one of them. Those 2 things are so closely linked as demonstrated by this infographic here that shows should a pedestrian be hit by a vehicle traveling at 25 miles an hour, they have a reasonably good chance of surviving that interaction, 89%. Now, as speeds climb up into that 35 mile an hour range or 45 miles an hour, that goes way down to just about a third. So we know that on neighborhood roads, we want people to be driving the speed limit. That's almost always around 25 miles an hour. And that will create an environment that's safe to walk around, and you won't have to be worried about being struck by vehicles going at really high speeds. This is a really popular program. So when Amalie Drive was selected in August of 2024, you were one of 25 neighborhood streets chosen from a pool of around 575. So we talked in greater detail about the prioritization process last time, but essentially Y'all were ranked through a data-driven process in the highest section of streets that were demonstrated to need traffic calming in order to address some of the complaints that we heard about in meeting one. So there are a few tools at NDOT's disposal in the traffic calming program, but there are all kinds of things that Metro Nashville does both within NDOT and outside of NDOT. So we like to use these meetings as an opportunity to make sure everyone is aware that Hub Nashville is a great resource for anything that we're not able to cover in this meeting tonight. That can be accessed by calling 311. You can also go online to hub.Nashville.gov. And there's also a smartphone app that can be used that's pretty handy as well. That's how I usually access it, and it's pretty convenient. Moving on, this is a map of both Amalie Drive right there in the center of the screen, colored kind of that lime green because we are in the design phase of this project. But we're looking at a screenshot of NDOT's live traffic calming tracker. So every other line that you see that isn't white is a traffic calming project that has either been applied for in the case of the magenta lines, in construction in the case of some of those green ones, or already installed in the case of those blue dashed lines. So should anyone not be familiar with some of the treatments we're discussing here tonight, it looks like you could go visit Brewer Drive or Huntington Parkway, or perhaps Ocala Drive to see some close by examples of traffic calming in action. Next, we're going to talk about the measures that we have proposed for Amalie and then look at the plans. But before I do that, I want to pause and just see if anyone on the phone has any questions about what we've covered so far before we move on. And we also have the chat. If anyone would prefer to write their questions down there, I'll see them and I can answer them just as easily. Sounds like no questions for now, so we'll keep on going.
Pictures?
Oh,
sorry,
yes.
The pictures that you're referring to, are we able to view those if we're online or somewhere?
Oh, yes. So for anyone who is called in but is not able to see the slides that I'm sharing, this recording will be uploaded to YouTube, so you could refer back to that. But also, we're going to post the plans online before initiating the ballot. So at the very least, you'll be able to see the specific measures and locations that we're proposing before being asked to decide, yes or no.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, so we talked about this in our last meeting because our proposed construction design and our preliminary concept look quite similar with some minor adjustments that we can dig into in a minute. But the primary device we're intending to use for slowing speeds are called speed cushions. So these are modular rubber devices that are bolted onto the asphalt directly. And they work kind of like speed bumps, but with a higher target speed. So where speed bumps are a little taller and much shorter, these are about 3 inches high and just kind of stretched way out to lengths of either 7, 10.5, or 14 feet, depending on a neighborhood's context and speeds. And the intent there is to be able to be comfortably traversed at a speed of around 20 to 25 miles an hour. So we're not asking people to drive like really slow over these, like 5 to 10, like you might in a parking lot. But if people are going faster in that 30, 35, 40 mile an hour range, that will not be quite as comfortable to drive over. You'll notice that they are 6 feet wide that creates some gaps in between the cushions, and those are intended for emergency vehicles that have a little bit wider wheelbases. And the thought is they can be less impacted by these by kind of hitting it right on the center and traversing a little more easily than a smaller vehicle that would have to interact with these a little more than a larger one. These are a pretty standard traffic calming device that's been used all over Nashville, as many of you all know. And that's mainly because we know they work pretty well. So what we're looking at here are the results of a limited study of a few traffic calming projects before and after installation. And what we found is that the average speed came down from 31 miles an hour to 22, and the 85th percent speed dropped all the way from 37 miles an hour to 25. Now, if I recall correctly, the 85th percent speed that we measured on Amalie was just a shred north of 40, which is way over the speed limit and definitely not a level that we like to see when we evaluate projects. But the hope is that should speed cushions be installed, you could see pretty significant improvement in the speeds that you all experience on your street. We are not able to do vertical measures everywhere, and the big obstacle that we have on Amalie is the really large and steep hill that is kind of halfway in between the northern and southern ends of the project. So we know that that is a spot where people may speed. While our tools are somewhat limited, we've proposed 2 radar feedback signs to, at the very least, serve as a reminder to those who are driving on Amalie that, hey, if you're going down this hill and picking up speed, perhaps unintentionally, this will show you how fast you're going in a way that lets you compare with the speed limit and then hopefully adjust course. You know, should you be going significantly faster than we'd like you to. While these don't physically affect one's driving, there's no like photos taken or enforcement done with these. It's purely like an informational device. We do still see an average speed reduction of 6 to 7 miles an hour, which is encouraging, and you know, it helps us believe that these are a worthwhile tool. So now we're going to take a look at the plans. Like I mentioned, this will look fairly familiar to the preliminary concept that was presented back in November. So starting south and proceeding north, we have a set of speed cushions right on the low point of kind of a dip in the road. So it's basically directly above what looks like a creek of sorts, maybe just a little drainage ditch. And pretty shortly after that, we start to see the grades that are a little steeper than we're feeling good about placing speed cushions. So that's where we have that radar feedback sign facing uphill for any drivers that are picking up speed going down. Once you get up to the top of the hill at Huntington Ridge Place, you'll see a similar device coming down on the other side if you were proceeding north. So both of those radar feedback signs are facing uphill to communicate to drivers who are traveling downhill. After you've gotten to an appropriately flat area further down, you'll have a series of 3 sets of speed cushions before you get to McMurray Drive. These are spaced out pretty deliberately. We shoot for somewhere between 300 and 500 feet apart. As I mentioned, that's not always feasible, particularly when steep grades are involved. And we also avoid things like driveways, intersections, stop control. There's a handful of constraints that we consider when we're placing these. So that series is spaced about right, but of course we are aware that there's that gap on the hill. Gonna kind of just page through the detail sheets. These are just zoomed in versions of the cover sheet we just looked at. And I'm happy to stop at any point if somebody sees something they'd like to talk about. But while I scroll through these, I do want to address some of the feedback we received in the last meeting. And that was residents asking for a device that could warn those exiting these driveways if vehicles were approaching from either end. That's something that I did a good amount of research on following that meeting, and we had some discussions both within the traffic calming group at NDOT and with their signals group. And we learned that in this case, those really are not the best idea. And the point that was particularly convincing for me is that should anything ever like happen to that device and it stopped working and wasn't flashing when it should be, that would create a situation where a driver might have a heightened sense of security that could get them into a bad situation. So all that is to say, we did look into it pretty thoroughly, but we are confident in the decision that it should not be installed here. We do, however, think that with speed cushions at both ends of the hill, hopefully we'll have fewer people speeding up and over the hill as they proceed up or down the street. I do see two questions in the chat, so I'm going to read those out loud for the benefit of the group and then answer. So we've got a question that says, can the radar feedback signs be able to assist with cars traveling up the hill? Speeding is regularly happening up the hill and dangerously impacts the blind drives. So we typically do not install radar feedback signs with that degree of intensity. So 4 would be a lot for a street as short as Amalie Drive. I do recognize that some have experienced folks speeding up and over the hill. We would like to find out if the traffic calming devices before the hill help discourage that before we propose like a highly intense amount of radar signs. And then the next question is, what about one of those big bubble mirrors where you can see?
Did like hold? Or is it that?
Yeah, just to sort of further explain, there are a few like light poles right there. I think I've seen before where you put a mirror where like those who are coming towards the top of the hill. I live in Huntington Ridge, and I have to turn left into that with people cresting a blind hill. And I've seen it before where you can put like a large bubble mirror where you can sort of see down the hill. I don't know how well that would work, but do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah. Those are not something that we've done in this program before. It doesn't feel like it's out of the question, so I'd be happy to look into it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate that suggestion. Because yeah, that would be something that doesn't rely on like electronics, and you know, it might fade after a while, but at least it won't have the same problem as the flashing kind of radar device. And then the last sheet of these plans is kind of the construction details for what the given configurations look like. As you all are well aware, Amalie Drive kind of narrows and flares out to a pretty extreme degree at different portions. There are bike lanes on Amalie for a segment of it. So this is just to show kind of how those speed cushions should interact with those different roadway widths to make sure that we're discouraging anyone from like circumventing the cushions, but also making sure they go in correctly and in a way that we hope will be the most effective. So I've got another question. I believe the neighborhood has had one in the past, but maybe vandalism ended it. Would have been many years ago. That's probably a good thing I can look into. There may have been one. I hadn't heard of it in the last meeting, but yeah, certainly it's not hard to imagine that those wouldn't last forever. But does anyone on the call who may have lived here a while remember if like a convex smear was ever out there to assist with visibility. Well, in any case, I think it's worth looking into, and I can run that down and see if it's something that we'd be able to include with this design. So that's it for the plans. We're happy to circle back if any other questions surface. We can also move on to kind of talking about the flow for the rest of the project's process. But before I jump in, want to just confirm, is everyone okay with what they've seen in the construction plans?
David,
Can I just say something?
Please, yes.
So I didn't, this is the first meeting I've come to. I'm on the phone. But anyway, I'm assuming that a stoplight and traffic light have been rolled out.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Because the main, I mean, I live at Huntington Ridge too, and the main problem is whether you're going in or you're going out, you can't see the car coming over the hill until they're there, you know? So
Yes.
that's my main concern.
Yeah, understood. And our last meeting was in person at Huntington Ridge. So I had the pleasure of experiencing that myself, and I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
a driveway I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
And we've got a limited set of tools to work with that we're trying to make sure we can improve the situation with what we're able to work with.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure thing.
I do have a quick question. With the speed cushions that are on either side of the top of the hill, is there a way to calculate, and has it been calculated with the grade of the hill and the location of the speed cushion? When someone crosses the speed cushion, what is the reasonable amount of speed they're able to actually gain as they continue up the hill? So is there a way to understand what the average speed someone will actually be at once they top the hill after coming over the last speed cushion?
Well, that's a good question.
But
I know that,
like, is it reasonable to assume that they should only maybe be able to get up to around 25 miles an hour by the time they've gone over the speed cushion and gotten to the top of the hill?
yeah, I suspect it depends really strongly on like the kind of vehicle they're driving, particularly because of the hill. We do have access to research that sort of studies like the speed curves on traffic calming streets. So as one might expect, speeds kind of dip down at the speed cushions and then sort of slowly climb back up to higher speeds. And that's what we derive that kind of ideal spacing from. So that sort of 300 to 500 foot range is intended to be spaced such that by the time you're back up to a speed that is maybe higher than we'd like to have folks driving, you're encountering another cushion. The hill certainly complicates that, and a lot of the research that is done in that regard has not been performed in places that are as hilly as Nashville. So I can't give you a really detailed answer to that question, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
Sure thing. Anything else before we move on to next steps, balloting, kind of that set of topics? Okay. Well, to briefly review the flow chart we looked at last time, these projects all start with an application submitted by residents or NHOA or neighborhood association. And then, as we discussed, it's prioritized through collection of data and GIS analysis. Once selected, we had our first neighborhood meeting back in November. We then did a field review, site visit, checking grades, pavement widths, kind of all that observing in person. And now we're here in that red box at the second neighborhood meeting. After tonight, we're going to look into any of the feedback that we collected here today. I will kind of run down that mirror idea and see if it's something that we think could benefit the project. But then once our construction plans are ready to go, we'll upload them to NDOT's website and send out ballot mailers. So the ballot is an opportunity for anyone who owns a parcel of land that touches the effective right-of-way to vote yes or no for the project. It's a ballot that happens online. It'll be open for 6 weeks, and should 2/3 of respondents vote yes, the project is approved and will proceed to construction. The construction process right now is in a backlog that's taking between 8 to 10 months to work its way to the front of the line. Once we start building it, it happens pretty quickly. So you won't need to worry about a lot of like disruption to Amalie Drive, but it will probably be a little while before the construction is able to start. A little more about the balloting. The mailer that y'all receive will have instructions on how to access the ballots, like the website and a QR code going to the form, as well as a unique ID code. So you'll want to vote with the ID that was on the ballot sent to you, because then it will, not be like filtered out as those ballots are evaluated. As I mentioned, it's a period that's open for 6 weeks, and a 2/3 yes is a success for the project. I will say the vast majority of projects that we select for traffic calming do get approved through that balloting process. That being said, it's probably worth your time to discuss with your neighbors who maybe weren't able to make it to this meeting, and just kind of let them know, hey, you might get a postcard in the mail that looks like this. We realize that online meetings are not able to reach everyone with different schedules and things like that. To clarify a little bit about what I mentioned earlier, we send these to everyone who owns a parcel of land that touches the affected right-of-way. So that is this yellow graph here. Now, this is a really goofy shape, and that's because condos are treated in a pretty interesting way, where basically everyone who owns one of these condos owns in common the piece of land that touches the roadway. So with those kind of bizarre looking offshoots, that's what's going on there and why. We do sort out like duplicates, so we don't send multiple codes to one person. We also verify if a property is like empty, meaning no buildings are on it. So we won't send a ballot to an empty plot of land. I don't think y'all have any like operating businesses on Amalie, but we are looking for the residences of a street, because those typically are the people experiencing the discomfort created by dangerous driving. I see a question in the chat. Were these already sent out? No. So we sent out similar mailers to this list to advertise this meeting, but we have not sent out the ballots yet. We'll do that once the construction plans are like finalized, but it should be pretty close to now, maybe within like a couple weeks of tonight. That's all I've got. Happy to take any questions. Really feel free to ask whatever. We can go back to any of the slides. And then if you think of anything afterwards, I've got my email address on the screen. So feel free to send me an email at david.greaves@kimley-horn.com. And also go ahead and copy NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov on those, just to make sure everyone who needs to be in the loop is. But I'll just pause and let y'all ask any questions. Oh, I see Jennifer has got her hand up.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have listened to what you have there, and it looks like there are a number of opportunities to slow down traffic below the hill. I'm at Huntington Ridge and am not seeing a lot besides the decrease likely of traffic taking Amalie going forward that will address the issues that we have at Huntington Ridge. Just wondering if that's an accurate statement and if there's going to be something further to look at for that, or if you perceive with the traffic calming that that will address the blind drive and issues we have at the top of the hill.
We really hope that the traffic calming on both sides does improve the speeds and volumes at the top of the hill. There isn't really much we can do about the geometry of the roadway. Certainly the sight distance is shorter than everyone would prefer. And we do recognize that it makes it quite uncomfortable to exit and enter those driveways with the chance that somebody might be coming over that hill. Hopefully, if they're going slower than they are today, where they're going quite fast on average, that would be an improvement. But you are right. Given the grades of the hills, the options we have to address speeds like directly at that spot are really limited.
David, you mentioned something about Metro Police near the beginning. Can you just remind us what you were saying that related to them? How are
Sure.
they possibly involved with this? And is there anything more that could be used at the top of the hill that could be a deterrent, if more than just a sign that's a courtesy to remind you of what your speed is, but a camera that takes a photo if you're speeding? Anything like that? Are there deterrents like that exist that could be incorporated here?
Short of having a police officer there to take speeds and write tickets, options are pretty limited. One reason for that is the whole state of Tennessee does not apply really any teeth to automatic enforcement. So that's why you don't really see any speed cameras around Nashville. I think you are allowed to take a photo and mail a citation or something, but there's really no way that can actually be enforced. So unfortunately, automated enforcement in Tennessee is not on the table. I do know that MNPD maintains some kind of list of streets that see speeding and sort of rotates around. I would encourage you to submit a hub request to that effect, and they may choose to have an officer out there from time to time. All that being said, I'm here with NDOT, and that's the department that is doing this project. So we're not really able to direct MNPD to do anything.
Okay, but it's good to know that Hub is the place to maybe request that, so that someone could come every once in a while. That could just be a reminder to people who fly through that there will be some. You never know if someone is going to be there watching.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
So, with the voting, if people do not vote to implement this, would you guys come up with another plan to help, or is it you guys vote no and you get nothing?
That's a great question. So per NDOT's traffic calming policy manual, what you all are technically voting on is whether or not you are okay with vertical measures being installed in the travel lane. So that means the speed cushions themselves. That doesn't mean signs and striping things outside of the travel lane. So what we sometimes do when we know there's a serious like safety issue on a street and the traffic calming ballot fails is we'll generate a design that relies on only signs and striping. I will say we don't love it when that happens because we kind of know that speed cushions are more effective as physical deterrents to speeding rather than sort of the signing and striping that is out there today. But we would likely still feel that the radar signs themselves would be, you know, a worthy thing to put in, and those do not rely on passing the ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
I do have another question.
Sure.
How was it decided that speed cushions are the preferred option as opposed to speed tables? I know speed humps are probably too much, but then the speed tables. So I guess there's a varying degree of all of those. Why speed cushions? That seems to be like the most or the least type, right? Is there a reason that was chosen over something a little bit more extreme of a hump?
That's a good question. So speed tables and speed cushions, as they're installed in Nashville, geometrically are almost exactly the same. So they're made out of the same like rubber modules. They've got the same slopes up and down. So we think that they should perform like almost identically. I did mention at the beginning kind of a limited study that was done that demonstrated before and after effects of speed cushions. We would like to do a little more research on the numerous projects that have been installed in the last like couple of years to hopefully give you a better answer to that question. But I will say that we don't think speed cushions are like substantially less effective than speed tables, but they do come with the benefit of a lesser impact to things like fire trucks and ambulances. Whereas with a speed table, they would have to be, you know, deflected vertically just as much as any other vehicle. So speed cushions in general are kind of the go-to for all traffic calming projects nowadays.
This is Jennifer. I have another question.
Sure.
I appreciate you clarifying what it is that we'll be voting for on the ballot. And I appreciate Emily asking questions about possible police monitoring or increasing that aspect. My question for you is, are there other resources that would be open to Huntington Ridge that you could point us to that could assist us beyond the traffic calming if the traffic calming does not provide relief to us at the top of the hill?
That's a great question. Hub is probably where I would start. Your council member, Bob Nash, is aware of the issues. He was at the last meeting, so he knows all about this project and had some really good insight to offer. So certainly, you know, keeping him updated on what the results of a project, should it be installed, are would be helpful. Beyond that, it's hard to say. I don't really get too involved with you know, NDOT's other various programs, but the really like centralized hub Nashville is probably the best resource to communicate to Metro what issues you're experiencing.
Can I pop on to say hello, Councilmember Nash? I see you popped on.
Oh, Councilmember Nash, welcome. Well, any other questions? Well, if not, I mean, again, please feel free to email me should anything come up after this meeting. This on the screen is a QR code to TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. It has a lot more information, both about the measures we discussed, other projects around the city, and has that live traffic calming tracker we took a look at earlier. Also, feel free to follow NDOT on the various social media platforms. They post updates about a lot of different projects around the city that folks might want to keep tabs on. But if there's nothing else to cover before we wrap up, just want to say thank you all for your time this evening. Really appreciate your engagement and the feedback you've provided to us on this project. And I'm excited to finish up those plans and then send the ballots out to you all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Y'all have
Thanks,
a good
David. Bye.
You too.